Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on musical theatre dramaturgy. My name is Matthew Jacobs Morgan. I'm a writer and director and actor, and I'm your host today. And I just want to introduce you to our first guest who organised all of this, who is Adam Lanson. I know Adam, I've seen Adam at work in both his dramaturgy and director hats, and both which suit him very well. But he'll be able to give you a proper introduction to him and his practice.
Oh, hello. Sorry, the internet bumped a bit. Should I say hello now?
No worries.
Um,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah, so I'm a director and dramaturg of new musicals. I work primarily in new musical theatre, and um, I'm particularly interested in musicals that are not for families and that I've said this line before, but that challenge our presumptions of what musicals should look like, sound like, or be about.
Great. We've also got Deborah Vogt with us.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name's Deborah. I'm from Canada, although I've lived in London for about
Hello.
7 years now. Or was the sound being a bit, am I behind? I don't know. Anyway, I've been a playwright for about 8 years or so, and I think I've been doing dramaturgy for almost as long, although the word for it came a little bit later. I didn't know what it was at first. And yeah, I've been writing musicals for maybe about 5 years. That world was felt a little bit inaccessible to me at first, even though I was a total musical theater. And it wasn't until a friend asked me to join a project that I got involved, and I haven't looked back.
Great. Well, welcome, Deborah. We've also got Tamara Saringer.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Tamara Saringer. I am a musical director and musical supervisor here in London. I'm also from Canada. I relocated to the UK in 2014. I do a mixture of work, and I sort of do larger scale commercial musicals and a lot of new writing as well. I'm a resident MD and co-founder of Signal, which Adam and I do together, which is a concert series showcasing new writing. Yeah, right now I'm doing a cast recording of a new musical called Stay Awake Jake, which is a fantastic new musical written by a composer named Tim Gilvin. Yeah, that's me.
Great. And last but not least, we have the lovely Ellie Coote.
Hello. Yes, I'm Ellie Coote. I'm a director of new musical theatre, and then more recently have kind of transitioned into doing more dramaturgy and book writing as well. I'm also co-founder of Chalk Musical Theatre Dramaturgy with Deborah. At the moment, I'm writing a musical with Jack Godfrey, which is currently still untitled, but it's about climate change. We do know that much. That's about it.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So to start off with, I'd like to direct a question to you, Deborah. And that question is, what is dramaturgy?
Super simple question. I think it's funny because that's probably, if you are a dramaturg, that's probably the most common question you get, and it's probably the hardest thing to answer.
Right.
So it goes that you could ask 10 different dramaturgs that question and you'd get 15 different answers. I think that's kind of because it's a really flexible and adaptable role, and it completely depends on the relationship and you're working on. But the way that I was trained growing up early on was that there's kind of two main strands of dramaturgy, and that's new play dramaturgy or production dramaturgy. New play dramaturgy is kind of self-explanatory. You're working with a playwright or maybe a group of writers on developing a new piece of work, whether that's just through giving feedback or workshops. You're just part of that process. Production dramaturgy is more about being in the rehearsal room, working with directors, designers, actors, and that can also be a very different role. But for me, that's mostly been about providing research and kind of acting on behalf of a playwright that isn't present. So that can mean preparing a resource document that tells you really specific things like what kind of pies would be on the menu in Sweeney Todd's London, or what ring does a Pope wear his finger on, or it could be about finding out what was happening in the wider world during a time a play was set. So that kind of thing. But it's pretty flexible, and personally, I'm most excited about working with new writers on new work.
Great, fantastic. Tamara, what is music dramaturgy?
Well, I mean, I think start by saying that it's quite a new term even for me. It's something that I've just started using recently to sort of describe a type of work I often do on musicals that is outside of my work as a music director or supervisor. I think it's sort of about taking a step back and having like a bigger picture view of the score in of itself and sort of analyzing the different components of the score, how they all work together to effectively tell story through song. The many components being arrangements, orchestrations, style, tonality, underscoring, melody, how all of those things work together to sort of create your storytelling and express the sort of the narrative and emotional content that you as a writer or as a composer are trying to express through your music. So yeah, I mean, it's work I sometimes do as a music director, often do as a music director. There are crossovers, but it's sort of taking a step back and really looking at the development of a score before or outside of production or workshop.
Okay, cool, awesome. Adam, I have a question for you. How is musical theatre dramaturgy different from other types of dramaturgy?
I suppose I would say that dramaturgy is a kind of overarching construct which relates to almost every form of art, which is how stories work, how characters work, how stories are shaped and arced and fit together so that they're dynamic and propulsive and clear, so there's like a decent onboarding point for an audience where they understand all of the rules, and that almost the piece can work without you noticing how it's working. So I think musical theatre dramaturgy is still about all of those things, and I think that a lot of a dramaturg's toolkit within musical theatre is based on, you know, all of the things that you'd work with in any case: act structure, story structure, tempo, chronology, all of those things. My awareness is just musicals are have more types of information in them, I would say, than most other things. They have music, they have lyrics, they have text, words, and the way in which you treat that sort of interaction of those information types is different. Like a song is denser because of all of that different information, so it can do different things, it reacts differently, it can. So to me, musical theatre dramaturgy is like a subset of dramaturgy. It includes all of the same things, but also has its own particular peculiarities and specificities. And for me, I guess one of the things I always observe is that it's a kind of given that in order to understand dramaturgy, that you might want to understand storytelling and structure in Greek tragedy or in Shakespeare, or but I feel like it's often a bit of a one-way street, and that people will assume that if they are dramaturgs of other things, that they can just pop into musicals whenever. But there's so much specific history and structure and kind of knowledge base behind musicals. And I suppose my project of the last few years is trying to make it more of a two-way street, to try and make those who work within new writing in general appreciate and come to terms with the specificities of how musicals function, and the way scene and song work, and the way structure and tempo work specifically within a musical. As I say, all skills are transferable, but for me, it's about understanding the superpowers of a musical, I guess, the abilities of music to hold and contain and wrap around storytelling, to translate and transfer between different types of information quickly. And yeah, anyway, that's so part of, but also distinct from.
Okay, just to jump off of what you said, would you say that with musical theatre dramaturgy, it sort of lends itself to a slightly longer development period or longer rehearsal period because of the fact that there are so many different factors involved in building a story within a musical?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was saying this to Tamara yesterday, which is that music is, well, the way that those layers interact means that you're kind of creating a three-dimensional structure built of various different interacting properties. And you can't just change them all in one night. You hear these very romantic stories of a playwright rewriting a third of their play in one night. They sort of went home and they like tossed out 5 scenes and rewrote them. You can write 30 minutes of theatre in one night, and sort of organize it, I suppose, but you can't with musicals because it's a sort of a group. It's a group organization. It's like an ordering of unequal things that sometimes all come from one person, but even when they're coming from one person, they're different. So yeah, and also like just when you integrate them by like pulling together a score and a script, like that takes time, and then unpacking them takes time. So yeah, it takes longer, and I think that's sometimes why people are afraid of or dismissive of musicals, because it seems like, I don't know, they're just less comprehensible and take more time and energy to kind of care about. But I think it's worth it, because for me it's like a super form which contains all of my other favorite forms all in one thing. It's like I like concerts, and I like stories, and I like music, and I like headphones, and I just like musical theatre. To me it seems like it's undermined a lot, but for me it's like a super form.
Okay, awesome. Ellie, you have been very much carving out a space for musical theatre dramaturgy within the industry. Can you talk a bit about what you've been working on and how you've been going about that?
Yeah. So in May, Deborah and I launched Chalk Musical Theatre Dramaturgy, which is essentially kind of operates on 2 functions. The first is as a script reading service for musical theatre writers. So you can send in your libretto and sheet music or demos of songs, and we give you kind of dramaturgical feedback and provocations on that. And then the kind of second part of it is trying to kind of be a bridge between writers and the people that might be able to develop their work or get their work staged. I think it kind of came about because we felt like there was a space that wasn't being filled in terms of specific musical theatre dramaturgy. I think I've found that a lot of the dramaturgical work that goes on in new musicals is kind of happens as like a director dramaturg thing happening together, and there's not a huge amount of dramaturgy necessarily that goes on just the text itself, and that can be somewhat of a problem, because I think often to get your musical staged, it has to theoretically kind of go through literary departments, so it has to really work on the page, and people have to be able to understand it from the page, and yeah, so we wanted to really approach it from that perspective, rather than from like the director dramaturgy kind of blend, which has its own uses as well. But maybe there wasn't, so much dramaturgy going on that is pure dramaturgy. The other thing is that there feels like in new musical theatre over the time that I've been in the industry, which I feel very lucky to have kind of come into the industry at this point, is that a lot of the spaces that are helping kind of new work and new musicals to develop are kind of workshop spaces or scratch nights or things like that, where there's an element of performance involved. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be a subtext to those spaces, which is kind of about applause and praise and approval from your peers, which is completely useful, and I think is a wonderful thing that's kind of popped up recently and is forming an amazing community of writers. But I also think there needs to be spaces for writers to go to have more detailed kind of sustained development of their work, which isn't about kind of seeking the approval of other writers or other people interested in new musical theatre. Yeah. Cool. And just about sorry, I'm going to waffle on forever, but just about the kind of bridging the gap between producers and writers. It seems to me that there are very few literary departments or theatres that accept musicals as submissions. And I think that's problem. It seems to suggest that musicals aren't written down, or somehow aren't a kind of textual form, and they can become, because of that, they can become a lot of the successful musicals can become a producer's medium, which means that so much of the major commercial stuff that we're seeing can end up looking and sounding very similar. And so I think it's really important to kind of carve out a space for people who know how to read musicals and to respond to that, and to help writers build the world that they want to build, to kind of translate it to people in literary departments, or, you know, having literary departments hire more people that understand musical theatre as a form. And I think dramaturgs can really fill that gap. So those are the kind of spaces that I think people like Adam and Deborah and Tamara and me and anyone else, and you, Matt, and anyone else working on new musical theatre dramaturgy can fill. Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Can I leap in?
Yes, absolutely.
There's so much to reflect on there. I so agree with everything Ellie said, and I feel my observation often is that theatres don't accept submissions of musicals, and that each theatre is this sort of self-generating their own solitary musical, which, you know, one day they hope might be their Hamilton or their, you know, their Warhorse or their Curious Incident. Neither of those are musicals, but, you know, both of them are shows that keep finances coming into a space that is through commercial ticket sales. And it feels a little bit like there's one rule for plays and a different one for musicals. And a lot of what I began because I kept knocking on doors of theatres and going, can I have a conversation about how to interact with your new writing department in some small way, even if it's just to like read scripts or do this or do that. And I found that you could never really have that conversation as someone who defined as someone who worked in musical theatre, that you always kept on the outside, because there was no ecosystem within those buildings often, even because people didn't know how to handle it. And I think more and more we're just trying to open up this conversation about what is going on for writers. I mean, when Tamara and I started Signal, there was this idea of like trying to create a space to show the different types of musicals that people were writing and how different they sounded and felt, and to kind of try and create a public face for that. But at the same time, most of the work has actually just been like private, has been back behind the scenes, working with writers and making sure that those writers gain confidence and skill to make sure that the musicals they're writing are everything that they can be. And also to me, musicals, I don't have money. Like, I'm not one of those producers that has money to just be able to do a production of something. So for me, there's been an awareness of like, how can you up the quality of something without being able to throw money at it? For me, a dramaturg is like the cheapest way of upscaling the quality of your work. You know, or a music dramaturg, having someone like Tamara working on the score, you can make something significant. I truly believe you can make something significantly better without having to spend thousands of pounds on workshopping something and being in a physical space and all of those things that are tricky. So I'm just like, if understanding a form expands it and makes it better. And so that's always everything I do. And I think like why I love this virtual room of people is that we're all just trying to understand our form better so that we can expand what it is capable of doing. And hopefully that joy is infectious, and that understanding and transparency is infectious enough that we will start to bring in people from theatres and to join us on this mission. Like the sort of evangelical mission I'm on.
And I think it's important to bring in new writers, because I know when I was a playwright before getting involved in musical theatre, this world felt really inaccessible to me, and I don't really know why, but it felt difficult to break into musical theatre. And also when I moved to London, the theatre industry felt a little bit daunting because it's obviously huge. I knew what the National Theatre was, but I didn't know anything about scratch nights. I didn't know anything about pub theatres or any of the theatrical climate here. So that's another thing I think that Chalk is trying to achieve, is for for people that have written a musical and they're thinking now what, and they don't have the connections, we're trying to be that kind of first step or that open door that really accepts anybody at whatever stage of their career or musical they're at. Making sure that anyone that wants to get involved can.
Awesome. Okay, Adam, can you talk about the ways in which you form a relationship and collaboration with an artist in a way which works for both sides?
Yeah, it's funny, when I started out as a director and I really just wanted to direct shows, and I began to realize that, you know, even if you're incredibly lucky, you're probably only going to be able to direct 4 things a year. And when it comes to musicals, you might have to spend 4 years on one musical. And I realized I just would rather be involved in helping to change the system a little bit more. So in sort of reinventing as a dramaturg producer, it's been about like, how can I be on the outside of more things and on the inside of fewer things for me? You know, I'd rather be involved in like 20 or 30 things a year peripherally. I've started to realize, but I think that question of being on the periphery involves like, you let the writer lead. Like everything I'm saying lately is like, the playwriting has long been seen as an artist's medium. I think musicals have slipped into the case, in my opinion, of being a producer's medium, as Ellie said. Producer options book, auditions, writer throws money, it happens. And I just think like, anyway, that's a bit of a long way around of saying put the artist first, and that's what I try to do in everything. So for me, it's about being responsive to what they ask for and what they want. So some people, every writer has a different way of working and a different way of understanding what they're doing. And for me, the other thing I know we always say is that dramaturg is like someone who's both on the inside and on the outside, which is that you understand something really well and you're like part of it, but you can also have a critical distance and hopefully you're and then the other thing I would always say is I'm always trying to like, I really like dislike the words I would do this, and I think that musical theatre, you should be like any other form of dramaturgy where you should be like, are you trying to achieve that? How can so for me it's always flexible, it's always reflective rather than prescriptive. And the other like buzz phrase I always say about it is I always feel like I'm divergent so that someone else can be convergent. So like I'd much rather say, hey, I'm observing this moment isn't quite communicating what you intend. Here are 5 ideas. Because I really don't love being a person who is bargaining to try and get my idea included. I think that's not that's not what it is. I mean, what do you having worked a bit with you, like what do you like?
I want to say that there's I completely agree with everything you said, but also that there's something really nice about having someone who's willing to chip in as well, in a sense, because there are times when you'll receive a piece of feedback and it will just lead you to a roadblock, whereas I very much felt like when I was working with you, it was like, here's how I'm feeling about this moment, or here's something which we need to communicate here, here's a bunch of ideas, and like even if those exact ideas didn't get used, it would always inspire, it would always like set something from my brain which led me to something really exciting. And it was very much a sort of I very much in a feeling of the collaboration being led by what I needed or what the project needed at the time, which varied day to day, varies minute to minute, to be honest. But it's just a sort of like constant dance of like, okay, how do we fix this, or how do we make this better, and it's just sort of something which is very much led by just led by the individuals who are working on any given project, I think. And that's what's really exciting about dramaturgy, is that I don't feel as if it's quite as clearly structured in a sense. It's sort of something which is a very sort of it feels anyway like it's a very malleable thing in a really exciting and helpful way, in which it's just that it in the way it serves a project and a writer. Would you agree with that, guys?
Yeah,
100%.
for sure.
Okay, cool. Because as I was talking, I was just like, wait, I'm literally like defining your job.
But the writer does define what a dramaturg does.
Well,
Yeah.
in a sense, but I was sort of like, oh yeah, I'm giving a job description of what you guys actually do, but I'm glad that's accurate.
I think whenever I'm like looking to relocate, like whenever I'm looking to re-anchor what the job I should be doing with a writer is, I'll always make sure to just be like, go back to those like ground questions, like why did you write this?
Yeah.
Like, what was keeping you awake at night that meant this poured out of you, or like what's bugging you today that links up to the piece? Like sometimes we'll be like somewhere really specific, and I'll just actually like the word I use, which disgusts some people, but I like it, is wound, which is that like I think work often comes from like a wound. Good work I think often comes from a desire to like process something that is difficult to process in other ways. And so I'm always a bit like, okay, we've talked for a while about how we're going to go from scene into song, but like why are we here?
Yeah.
It's often like quite nice.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Sure.
Ellie, can you talk to me a little bit about the sort of interaction between the book, the music and lyrics, and how you help artists bridge the gap between those things, and how you watch yourself as a creator?
Yeah, I think the practice of writing musicals has been built on these kind of big three, book, music, and lyrics. And I love that even when a writer is writing the whole thing themselves, they're still usually credited as book, music, and lyrics by. And I just think that's great, because we need to continue to recognize those disciplines and how they interact. But they've never been disciplines with hard edges. There's always been fluidity between them. And I think that's ultimately why I exclusively work in musicals, because you have these really rich collaborations, and it's often about kind of letting go of your own ego as a writer, because you know that your ideas might end up being transformed by somebody else, and I think that's where, so in my work as a dramaturg, that's where it's really interesting, because every single collaboration is different. You might be working with a writer one-on-one, and in which case there's you're trying to pull out all of these different things from one person. Whereas if you're working with three writers, you're kind of helping to bridge the understanding between those three things and make sure that everybody is trying to make the same piece. So everything feels completely different. As a writer, so I mentioned in my introduction that I'm currently working on a musical with Jack Godfrey, and it's sung through, but I'm credited as book writer and additional lyrics, and Jack's credited as music and lyrics. And I think I often kind of get the question of like, okay, well, what are you doing? Because there are no scenes. Which is, I think, a common misconception with how musicals are built. They're not kind of three components that are shoved together. They are working simultaneously. And as a book writer working on something that is completely sung through, everything that I say, or all of my ideas, or all of my words will be subsumed into a song. So I know what my contribution is, but it's not always completely obvious to other people where the work of a book writer ends and a songwriter begins. And I think there are different skill sets involved for sure, but what I love about fully kind of, once you get to a full production of a musical, nobody can say who came up with what, and nobody can say in what order it came in. Also, one of the most common questions I think for people writing musicals is like, okay, well, who goes first? Who starts, and then who comes second? And I think it's different for everybody, but for me, like it can go in all directions. You can start writing a song just talking about tone, and then the music happens, and then you understand what the words can be, or you can start with a kind of monologue and then things get pulled out as lyrics, and then it's you know, there's so many different ways of approaching it, and I think those are the most interesting collaborations, when everything's happening so organically, and the give and take is, you know, I like it.
Really good.
I remember being told that being a book writer is the least glamorous job in musical theater because anything good that you write will be turned into a song, which isn't necessarily true. But also, I don't know if it even matters, because I do feel like I have an equal amount of pride in either a song that maybe I wrote a monologue that inspired a song, or maybe I wasn't even involved with, but it enhances mode. Like, it's all one thing, and I think it's really great to be able to take ownership as a collective over these
I'd rather have my words be turned into a song.
Yeah.
You know, take them.
Yeah.
Make them sound great.
Awesome. So Deborah, when giving feedback to artists on a project, can you talk a little bit about how you approach that and how you find the balance between objectivity versus subjectivity when approaching?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's actually possible to be objective because, you know, we all have, you know, perspectives, and we all have biases that maybe factor into our work. But what I think you can do is take your preferences out of the room when you're reading a script and when you're doing dramaturgy. Because as Adam said, our job isn't really to be like, I would do it this way, or you should do it this way. I think my role is to identify what a writer is trying to achieve, what's the story they're trying to tell, and help them get there, help them tell that story. And the one kind of embarrassing technique that I used to do this is that I sometimes pretend that the script has been written by one of my closest friends. And I only do this when it's just a script read and not when I've had the chance to develop a relationship with the playwright, which is really an exciting thing to do. But if it's just a script read and you pretend it's written by a friend, I think the reason I do that, it reminds me that I'm always rooting for the script. I'm always rooting for the playwright, and you want them to create the best possible version of their story that they're gonna tell. And you're not trying to approach it with any judgment. And it also helps with that balance of positive feedback and questions and critiques, because I think there's a lot more to positive feedback than the whole compliment sandwich thing. I mean, it's nice to hear good things. I love that as well. But I also think it's really important for a writer to know what's working in their script so that they can keep digging there and keep going in that direction, as well as asking 1,000 questions, not all of which have to be answered, but might lead to some sort of inspiration, or might just tell them what's not clear in a script.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I think that's a really conducive to good work. Personally, I think that sort of approach is really, really, really good one. So, how did you? This is something for all of you. How did you all become dramaturgs, and when was it that you added that title to your email signature? And what were the sort of things? What are the resources that you read or watched, or the things that led you to where you are today as dramaturgs? Who wants to start? Why don't you start, Adam?
Okay. I mean, I still hear the word dramaturg and I think it sounds pretentious. And I think saying I do it makes me sound pretentious, but it's just, there's just no other one word. Like, I remember Tamara and I talking about the word and just being like, oh yeah, I could say script editor or script supervisor or new writing coordinator or like, but like they're just like, it is one word. And I think we sort of have to get used to that. I mean, for me, I just, I worked a lot on new musicals from the word go, mostly because I was afraid of doing Sondheim at the Fimbra. Like, love the Fimbra, but like don't want to do Follies there. So I was doing new stuff because I was like, at least I don't have to wrestle with the fact that it's happened with a bigger budget, with a more experienced team elsewhere. And then I began to realize that doing new stuff is amazing. You get to be with like the writer and you get to hear their thoughts and songs for the first time. So, but for years I was the writer's friend, the writer's support mechanism, the writer's bouncing board, like and I just thought this is what I love to be. I don't love to write. People often said to me, "Oh, you love musicals so much. Why don't you write?" I like to help reorganize and facilitate and smooth out someone else's ideas. You want to give me ideas? Give me a script. Give me a blank page. I'll do nothing. So I just got, especially New York, I started to see these like luminaries of musical theatre dramaturgy, especially people like Oscar Eustis at the Public Theatre, or Ira Weitzman at Lincoln Center, or Kent Nicholson at Playwrights Horizons. These people who you don't necessarily hear their name very often, but like when you start to dig into Strange Loop or Hamilton or Fun Home, you hear their names over and over again. And I was like, oh, these like godparents of these amazing new musicals. And I just realized there were very few people who did that in this country. Very few people who seem to know, have read the books or done the deep dives in the way I wanted to. And I was just a bit like, I guess I want to do that, but it's tricky because it's hard to not be following in someone's footsteps in this country. I mean, like, shout out to like Jeremy Sams, essentially, who's like maybe the one person I think of as a musical dramaturg in this country. I'm trying to think of others, but it's really hard. So you just carve your own path, but you also feel like an idiot when you're carving your own path, because you're like, I shall define myself as an expert in this, despite not knowing if you are. Probably are not, mostly. But I got to a point where I felt like I knew more than most people I was interacting with about musicals in theatre, and I thought, I'm going to put it on my... I remember saying, I'll put it in my biog that I'm like an expert of new musicals.
Yes.
And if no one like gave me shit about it, then I guess it had stuck. And I remember the day I actually did it, and I felt terrified about it, but turns out no one did give me shit about it, and a few people started believing it. So so I guess sometimes you gotta say it and hope it comes true.
Good. Yeah. Just sorry, I want to hear from everyone else, but also I just wanted to quickly say to our viewers, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, we've got a few more questions that I'm going to be asking, and then then we're going to be going on to audience questions. So please do write them in the comments below, and we'll get to them in just a little bit. Sorry, Deborah, do you want to tell us about how you came to dramaturgy?
Sure. Yeah, for me, I think it was less about when I added dramaturgy to my bio, and more about when I removed emerging. Because dramaturgy, actually, I think I came up as a playwright and dramaturg around the same time. They were really like parallel journeys for me. So yeah, I think it was more when I took that away, and emerging or early career is such a safety blanket thing, and it was difficult to think about when to take that out. And I think it was probably too recent that I removed that from my biography. But I think that there's a certain point where you just kind of have to own it and know that you have done the work and that you know what you're talking about. And I don't actually find the word dramaturgy or dramaturg pretentious. I love the word, and I'm pretty obsessed with dramaturgy and pretty proudly wear that hat. But I do understand that it has a negative connotation for some people. A lot of people don't like it, but I think that comes from not understanding it or maybe having a bad experience with the dramaturg. And I think it's our role to try to fight that and to show people how valuable that this part of the process is.
Okay. What about you, Ellie? How did you come to this world?
Kind of exposure to what a dramaturg is was watching Smash. And actually both the dramaturg and the director are kind of horrible people in that show. Yeah. But that was definitely like the first catching the bug of like wanting to develop new musicals. But then I kind of came to dramaturgy through, as I said, I started directing new musical theatre, and I have been involved with far more workshops than I have been involved in productions. Right. And so like what that really means as a director is kind of odd, because you can say that you're directing a show, but if it hasn't gone to production, what does that really mean? And I sort of ended up becoming a way to describe work that I was already doing. and felt like my contributions were much more as a dramaturg than they actually were as a director. And so, yeah, it was on one way to kind of validate my contributions to a show. And now, and I think there was a period of time where I felt very blurred between a director, dramaturg, writer, and there's so much slippage between those things often, particularly with musicals and book writing. You can often take kind of a dramaturgical approach in that way. But it was, I think it's been a really important thing for me to be able to distinguish when I am being each of these things. And making sure that I kind of stay true to the practices of what I'm doing each time. I think I've loved doing Chalk recently. I mean, we only launched it in May, and being able to be just a dramaturg and not a director dramaturg has been just so nice, because it just, you're not having to think about anything concrete or visual. You're just being able to live with the writer in the imagined world of the play, which is such a nice space to be in.
Yeah, awesome. What about you, Tamara?
I mean, the term music dramaturg, I think, is, as I said, very, very new to me. In terms of my sort of journey with new writing, I think it was 2013. I wrote a musical, and it was a book writer approached me, and he said, "I've got this idea of like grindhouse cinema meets musical theater, this sort of super stylized, heightened, cinematic style of theater. And would you write the score?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And it was really interesting. It was really cool in the end, and I think it really just made me aware of the sort of potential of musical theater and what you can do with it in the sort of unconventional musical theater and new writing, and how exciting it is to do that process. So I think that was sort of the beginning of that journey for me. I did a master's degree a few years later, and I wrote my dissertation on new writing development. And since I've been here in London, I've done, I very quickly sort of found my home in the new writing community. And I've done loads and loads of workshops, and then I met Adam, and we did Signal, and Adam and I have done loads of work together as well. And I think I'm just happiest and most fulfilled and stimulated working in a new writing process. I just think it's hugely exciting, and the level of collaboration and going through that journey is just so interesting. I mean, I also love doing commercial musical theater. I like doing that as well, but I just really love the collaboration. And again, not even though I've written a musical, I don't really have any interest in composition. It was sort of something I tried out, and I'm glad I did, but it's not really where my passion lies. I really love working with composers to really bring the best out of the music that they have written and the ideas that they have. In terms of the word music dramaturg, again, it's just something I think I'm using now, and I guess now that I feel I do have quite a lot of experience and instinct working with new writing, and to be able to take that outside of a workshop and production process and help writers in the development process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome.
Good. Just to say something about Tamara. I read and I speak words, but like I don't always have the vocabulary to be able to comprehensively speak about music, and I think it's crazy how late in the day we often have someone who's not the composer who can speak music coming into the process of a musical. It's been such a thrill over the past years to know Tamara so well, and to be able to like have someone who can translate and who can be on the side of the composer who isn't the composer. And I don't know, I feel like that's an ingredient, that having someone who can speak, we were talking earlier about like having someone to speak for the writer, but like having someone who can speak for the composer who isn't the composer, I just think necessary, and it's mad that we haven't like necessarily embraced that sooner.
Yeah.
No,
and musical directors are often, I always find in workshops or in productions, making all these dramaturgical kind of inputs and changes at like supersonic speed whilst teaching a cast the songs. It's so ridiculously impressive, but there's I'd love to see more space being made for that work to happen before the note bashing begins.
I think that's a great point, Elliot, because I think that this sort of ties into what's the difference between an MD and a supervisor and a musical dramaturg in this context is you need a bit of space and time. Ideally, you have space and time with the score to sort of analyze it in the same way you need an objective perspective with the book to analyze that. I mean, of all the workshops I've done, probably most of them involve me getting the music the day of or the night before. And I mean, I think there's obvious reasons for that. I think, making a score is hugely time consuming. It takes a lot of time and effort and sometimes money in some cases. So I completely get why in a lot of cases it's the last thing that we get before we get to workshop. However, getting that sort of on the day or the night before means that while as an MD supervisor in the workshop forum, you can be dramaturgically looking at the piece and thinking about the overall structure and making suggestions, you've also got the execution hat on and the logistical hat, which is, music takes time to rehearse and you need to get it off on its feet. So you're focusing on that. So I guess what's interesting to me is if you take that away and you say, well, you're not MDing it, you've just got all the space and time to look at the score. What do you think? What can you do? What sort of integral work can you do before you go into a workshop and spend loads of money to get it on its feet? I think it's just really important to have a second opinion on your score and prioritize having some version of your score done so that someone can look at it before you go into the workshop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just that you hear these stories when you read Broadway, history books of these shows where the writing team and the dramaturg, show doctor figure and like director and musical supervisor, musical dramaturg, whether they were named that, all sat in rooms together with a piano for weeks on end. And that when you watch Smash, actually, that's the thing I think of is just teams in a room together talking until, like Ellie says, then you no idea who had what idea, like the boundaries blur and it's all just one lovely thing. And I don't know, I just think in my dreams there would be more space for like teams of 4 or 5 to have rooms that they could be in for weeks. And this is not to demote or kind of like deny the need to like have workshops with actors and performers and musicians and those, but I do feel there's a missing step that, first of all, is just having the ability to have space and time with a project, but also being in a room, tossing it about, and learning to like carry it together. Because I think.
Awesome. Adam, on that note, why are new musicals so important, and how would you define a musical?
I mean, that's a small question. For me, musicals are important because music is, I don't think just important, essential. I mean, I've given versions of this speech before, but like, we have music at the highest and the lowest points of our lives: funerals, birthdays, breakups, births. Like, music, people won't tend to remember the song that was playing when they first met. People tend to remember the song that played when they graduated high school. Like, songs are a time machine and they're like a timestamp, and music is everything to me. And music is religion for those who are religious, and it's a type of non-religion for people who aren't. It binds us together. And for me, music and stories are like these best friends. And for me, musical theatre is a no-brainer as this kind of super form. But I do always say that, like, musical theatre is like a kid playing the violin. It's like the worst thing ever if they're bad. and it's the best thing if it's good. You know, like a virtuosic violin player is an extraordinary thing, and a shit violinist is like put them all, get far away from them. And so I think musicals are this high risk form. They are high risk, and I think most people, when faced with them, decide to diminish or dismiss them, which upsets me.
Yeah.
Also, I just feel like, you know, plays tend to run for like a few years, and musicals run for decades. So there's this sense of what a musical is becomes defined by the past rather than by the present too often. And so people are like, oh, I don't like musicals because I don't love Les Mis, and it's a bit like, well, what? Like, there are people literally writing whose names you haven't heard of, whose songs you haven't heard yet. And whereas the new writing process for plays, the submission window, the kind of like the responsive idea, oh, I'm going to write about this because I've read about it in a newspaper, like musicals seem to be denied that some of the time, and I feel it isn't the writer's fault. For me, it's a systemic fault which sort of tends to put writers of musicals in a different box. And again, it's just a part of an ongoing project to try and change that, because I feel if theatres were to care about people who cared about musicals, it would be amazing. It would just like the joke I always tell is that like the next Lin-Manuel Miranda is texting me today, like, because there are 30 of them, and they're texting me today, and like I get lucky enough to hear their songs, but so the hell should you. And so yeah, I think sometimes people hear me tweet or speak and think I'm angry, and actually I'm not. I just bloody love writers, and I want more space for them and more time for them and more opportunity for them, because I think, you know, Disney doubled their subscriber base because they released Hamilton. They doubled their subscriber base, and they've already all of the Pixar movies, and they've already got all of the everything. And they, like, if that doesn't show you what musicals are capable of, but like, and how much, you know, I don't want to overuse Hamilton but it's artist driven. No audience wanted it until they wanted it. It's about something so bizarre and specific that only someone who was looking way around the corner saw it. And I think we let playwrights see around the corner, and we tell our musical writers not to. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry for waffling. Thanks for listening.
No, not. And just to go to audience questions, this one kind of links in with a question that we wanted to ask actually, which is about what dramaturgy can offer in rebuilding theatre in these current climates. Then when sort of asked a similar question about how we see musical theatre developing as we venture out of lockdown, and I think those two things definitely link together. What do you think? I'll throw that out towards you. How do you think the dramaturgy can benefit the new version of theatre that we're going to be going into after this period is over?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
I think in many ways we have a kind of opportunity, and this is coming from someone, I don't work in inside a specific theatre, and I think a lot of the answers will come from people working inside specific theatres, but we have an opportunity to facilitate and create work that serves communities better, that serves and create kind of environments that serves writers better. And I think that really starts by looking at who is being invited into the rooms, who is being invited into theatre spaces, and can we open that up a lot more than we are currently doing. And, you know, I think musical theatre creators are very much a part of that. I also think dramaturgs can be and should be useful in thinking about what writers need, what the world that they're creating is asking of theatres and asking of audiences. And that might also be to do with like, how are we restructuring theatres? How are we restructuring performance spaces? Like, is our theatres going to look different for a period of time? And I think dramaturgs can be really helpful in formulating those ideas, but starting with writers, not starting with theatres, starting with writers and starting with the work that's being created. Yeah.
Just to pick up on that a little bit, I mean, we started the conversation kind of trying to define what dramaturgy is, and one of the key things is that it's about flexibility and adaptability, and I think this is such an important time to be flexible. And other words that come to mind with dramaturgy, I know, is being open-minded and being compassionate, and I think these are both traits that we really need to focus on right now when we think about redefining theater. There's a quote, a dramaturg in America, Mark Bly, when he was talking about dramaturgy, he quoted somebody that quoted Rembrandt, saying that he had the eyes of a man who never stopped looking. And I don't know why, but I really like that, because I think we all have to aspire as theater makers, musical theater makers, dramaturgs, to continue to be curious and ask questions. And dramaturgs are good at looking outwards to what other performing arts are doing and what other industries are doing, and I think asking what we need and what we can achieve right now. And I've seen a lot of interesting conversations about how theater is going to emerge out of this with, immersive theater or a smaller class or whatever people are thinking about. But I haven't seen as many conversations about musical theater in that world in the same way. So I think, dramaturgs can play a really vital part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think great. We've got another audience question from Hilmi Jaden. What's a mistake new writers tend to make from a dramaturgical perspective?
Sometimes I think I might see people trying to do too much, especially in an early draft. I need to do another ensemble number or whatever else, trying to tick the boxes, and that can sometimes distract from the real heart of a piece.
So, what's important to the piece, or what works for that, rather than what they think makes up people, I guess. Yeah.
On a kind of, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think this is especially when someone is writing their first musical or has been a playwright and is now writing musicals. It's whether you're writing the whole thing or whether you're writing it in collaboration with somebody. Sometimes I find that new work does the same thing twice in the text and the score. And you go, oh, okay, well, this isn't a very effective use of your time, because you're trying to do the same thing in every single aspect. And sometimes lyric can do one thing whilst music is doing something else and book is doing something else, and they're holding each other together. And that's something that I think I see quite a lot from people just starting out in creating musicals. Which I guess is about trusting your collaborators and trusting each of the layers that are working in musicals to do their job.
Okay, that makes sense. We've got one last audience question, which is from Sandra, which is, have you ever dealt with a writer who doesn't know if their piece is a play or a musical? I think the lines, I personally think that the lines are starting to blur so much more in really exciting ways. Have you ever dealt with a writer who's had that issue? And if so, how have you dealt with that? And also, do you think it matters as much as it used to?
Can I don't know, just to start by answering Hilmi's question in a way that bridges the questions, maybe, was that very often I see people who decide that they want to write a musical, but in order to make their musical innovative, they don't look at past musicals at all. They're like, I want my musical to sound totally different from past musicals, so I will ignore, I won't listen to what's come before. And I think so many of the things that people are beginning to find innovation in were done like 50 years ago. Like, you can't get any more innovative than like a chorus line or Follies in terms of like the way that they like used form in musical theatre. And they were in the 70s and 80s, but So I don't know. I would just say, like, before you embark on a musical, like, don't be afraid of like listening to and watching some, because I don't think that the content necessarily comes with the form all the time. Like, I think you can separate them. So the reason I brought that up is I think a lot of people sometimes don't want to call their piece a musical because they are embarrassed of the term. That might be a presumption I have, that you know, you get more traction if you're writing a play with songs, or if you're writing gig theatre. I suppose my belief is, excuse another metaphor, but like, musicals are adept. There are, you know, let's say there are 52 cards in a musical theatre deck, which is like, oh, like montage, time expansion, time contraction, like location change, interior, exterior thought, like all of these different things a musical can do. Like, I often find that when someone hems themselves into making a piece that is not a musical, a play with songs, a piece of gig theatre, what they're often doing is they're taking away cards from their deck and going, people only sing when they would really sing in real life. People will only, you know, there will only be music if it's structured and rule based and led in. And I often just want to say, like, I don't necessarily think the best way of starting a piece that is music driven or music incorporated by like taking cards away. And I just think, like, musical theatre is a feature rich art form. Like, there are so many things it can do. So I would always just say, if a writer doesn't know if their piece is a play or a musical, it's just like, I would just like investigate the possibilities of the form that musicals are capable of. And, you know, there have been musicals that don't know whether to define themselves as musicals. Is Hedwig a musical? Like, or is it gig theatre? Is Once a play with songs, or is it a musical? Like, is Spring Awakening, none of the songs push the plot and they're all diegetic, so is that a musical? But like, they're all feature rich. So I would always just be like, as a dramaturg, it's my job to diverge and give people more options and more choices. So I would say, like, don't worry about what it's named. Although secretly, I hope you'll be proud enough one day to expand the term musical by calling your piece a musical. But like, who gives a shit? Like, just look at the features that your story can be told, that can enable the better telling of your story, and like work from there, I would say. And yeah. Whether that's an answer, I don't know, Sandra.
Awesome. Does anyone have anything to add to that, or any sort of closing remarks?
Keep writing new musicals.
Yeah, no, I think it is a really, really exciting time, and I think that hopefully, when we come out of this, the industry is going to be better versed with developing and creating new work rather than averse to it. So I'm excited and looking forward to it. And I hope that during this time, when people have had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to reflect, I think hopefully that's going to lead us to a really exciting future for the industry in general. Sure.
Just to add, I suppose, I've been going on about musicals for years now, but I do really want to like celebrate chalk dramaturgy as like a great place. If you've written something and you don't know where to go next, you've got someone to send it to now. And I also just really want to like promote Tamara, because I just think that, like, if you've got a score, if you've got demos, if you've got something and you need someone who can like take a look at it from a musical perspective, I don't know, I just want to say, like, hire these people if you want your musicals to get better. I mean, I would obviously, I believe in my ability to help make musicals better because that's where I live my life, but I have so much admiration for Ellie, Deborah and Tamara, and I think you should write to them. And I also especially think bringing musicians and into the conversations about musicals early, it's like it's like mad that I haven't really reflected on quite that until lockdown.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
I have to second that. I have to second that. I think everyone on this panel is doing really important work, and just in terms of enabling new writers to have an actual voice and to have access to the industry. I have to say that to be honest, my kind of way into the industry has been through Signal, which Adam and Tamara obviously founded, and that was very much my sort of introduction to new writing, and especially musical theatre new writing. And so I think that for that I'm hugely grateful. And so I think I can only second and third and fourth what Adam has said. Like reach out to these guys and work with them, and yeah, we need more incredible stories to be told.
Ooh.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Well, thank you all so much.
I would say we're all really easy to find on social media, and all have websites. So like, the conversation can be completely ongoing. If you're watching it not live, as I know some people are, then like keep talking.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And yeah, we look forward to continuing conversations off screen.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.